view. Hey guys, so welcome to KevJai. So in addition to our other videos that you guys have probably seen, we do training as well. We do a lot of stuff. Myself, I'm an architect. I'm a consultant architect, and Jai is a business analyst. And so, in addition to the wacky Wednesdays or reaction Wednesdays, we do a lot of stuff. We have a lot of clients that we train, and we do corporate training and things like that. So what we want to do today is just do a bit of a Q&A. I am a SharePoint consultant and a Microsoft certified technology specialist in SharePoint. And Jai, we were just talking offline. He wants to learn a little bit more about SharePoint. So we thought we just kind of record our conversation, our session, and hopefully you guys get some stuff out of it. So Jai, I think we are talking, like I said, you had some questions regarding SharePoint, so we'll just fire away.
Yeah, so I log into my M365, log into my, Microsoft Word, and I kept seeing SharePoint, and I'm like, I kind of know what SharePoint is, but I don't really know what it is, if you know what I mean. So being that you're the SharePoint expert, I just figured, let's ask the question. So what is SharePoint? How do you launch it? Like, if I click on it, what am I going to do? Like, what does it do for me?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So SharePoint basically is an enterprise content management system. It has a really long history. Microsoft's been using SharePoint since 2001 actually. So it's really, really old. Obviously, it's been advanced and enhanced some things over the years. But in a nutshell, all it is just document management. It's a enterprise content management system, but it's really just document management. So
Gotcha.
what you would use SharePoint for is pretty much just if you have like a company, medium to large size companies usually use SharePoint. And what you use it for is just pretty much storing documents. It's really predicated on metadata. So you can leverage once you have documents in SharePoint, you can attach metadata to it. And when you attach metadata to it, you can then kick up workflows. You can categorize, can filter, you can, do a litany of things with respect to managing your documents.
Gotcha.
So in a nutshell, that's SharePoint.
Okay, that's fair enough. I mean, Kev, you're the guru of this, but when you say metadata, what does that mean? Because in my mind, I'm thinking something very space oriented, like I'm going to Mars or something. So do you want to just break it down a little bit for me?
Yeah, all good. So metadata is basically attributes, or think of it as information that describes information.
Okay.
So if you have a document and that document is labeled XYZ dot doc, right? That's the document extension. And then you have another document 128.xls. So looking at it, you upload those documents. Someone for whatever reason didn't give it a great title. Once you upload that document in SharePoint, you can then now attach metadata or tags or columns to that document. So now when you upload that document, you're prompted to enter, say, the title name of this document, enter the date when this document has been finalized, enter the date of anything. Whether this document is completed or not, or whether this document needs approval or not. You can add any number of metadata or attributes to this document. And so when that XYZ document, even though it's still labeled XYZ in SharePoint, you now can search and filter with the name that you've given it using the title column or metadata.
Wow, that's a good breakout. So in other words, what you're saying is the metadata is like the characteristic of what qualifies that document. So if I look at a Microsoft Word document, like I store my document for maybe my taxes, the metadata is kind of like the language of the documents, the version of the documents, the date I store the document, when I modify the document. Are those things would you classify those things as metadata?
100%.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, anything that helps you describe and helps you work with that document, That's metadata. Its sole purpose is to provide you more information about the information. So in this case, that document or that accounting document or whatever that you have. So that's basically it. It's one of the foundational building blocks of SharePoint. And there's two major types of libraries that metadata is contained in. And one is called a list, and one is called a library. Lists pretty much think of it as records. And all it is just a bunch of rows and columns. That's all a list is. So basically, columns, which are metadata. And then when you create a new item in that list, that would become a new row of information. And those columns would be metadata for that particular information. So that's a list. In a library, though, you would upload documents. So for example, your accounting document that you mentioned, and then when you load that document, it would show up at the library. And then the columns there, the metadata, the columns in that library would help describe what that particular accounting document is.
I see.
So let's say, for example, you had a small company and you have an accounting document for, you had your balance sheet, and then you had your accounts receivables, like a document for accounts receivables. You had a document for expenses. So what you could do is you could upload all three of these documents into the document library, and then you could create metadata that would describe document type. And so now you have a document type, you create a new column called document type, and now you can label each document as.
No, but okay, let me see if I can explain it properly. So, well, not the same way that you would, but my brain is just trying to process it from a layman's perspective. So if I look at a library, I'm thinking of it's where it houses all the documents, correct? So that's where think of it as a storage space. And then the lists are how you characterize each of those documents that you place in the storage space. So think of it like a farm, like a barn in the farm. The barn is like the library. And if you're storing things like, let's just say rum, each rum container would have labels. It would be stored in rows and columns so you can know which type of rum you're creating or making. And if you have other items like crates of eggs, those are a different type of list, but stored in the same library. So it's just storing different things, and you have to label them as characteristics within that farm barn, which is the library. And then how you label them are the characteristics, which are the lists.
Yes. The only thing I would add or bifurcate is that a list library is completely different, but it is different from a document library.
Okay.
So, and it's important that you understand that, because sometimes you may not need a document because you're using SharePoint. You may not need to actually create a document or an Excel spreadsheet any longer because now you have SharePoint. So if you take your description or take your analogy of how, you want to inventory your beer and your alcohol and things like that, normally you would probably create an Excel spreadsheet, right?
Correct.
You would, do an Excel spreadsheet, and then you would, put in everything. And then you take that Excel spreadsheet and you would put into a document library in SharePoint, because the Excel spreadsheet is an actual document. So it needs to go into a document library. But in SharePoint, because you're using SharePoint, and all you're doing is you're just kind of cataloging and inventorying, what you could do is you could use a list library. And so remember what I said, a list library is just a series of rows and columns. Well, what's Excel? Excel is a series of rows and columns.
Correct.
So now what you could do is you could potentially create this inventory directly in SharePoint, right? So now you get the power of creating the metadata. You'd have to set the metadata of the types of attributes that you want to capture in this inventory. And then now you would be able to just click new, and then you'd be able to create your new row or record of information. And the cool thing here now is, now that you're using SharePoint as your inventory, you can now set up KPIs, you can set up metrics, you can set up alerts, You can set notifications that tell you if you're low on a certain product or something like that. You can now, pull it into Power BI, which is another arm of SharePoint, business intelligence, and a number of things. You can kick off workflows if you have it in SharePoint as well.
Awesome. Thank you for that explanation, Kev.
Yeah.
But so you mentioned a few things, and for those of you who don't know, KPIs, key performance indicators. Now you start talking about workflows and other items like Power BI, and being a novice, I want to understand what like workflow is, and how you talking about Power BI. Is it a part of SharePoint or it's an external program that's related to SharePoint?
But no, it's a good question. So Power BI it is an arm of M365. So maybe we should backtrack. So Microsoft 365 is basically a suite of productivity tools developed by Microsoft. It's all in the cloud. And it basically comprises of their standard stuff, which is Word, Excel, Outlook, Exchange, things like that. But there's also, like you mentioned, you see SharePoint. SharePoint is the document management side of things. And so the other arm is the Power Platform. So it's a newer type of technology built within M365, but it's called the Power Platform Suite or Power Platform Apps. And the three main apps are Power Apps, Power Automate, and Power BI. There's other ones too, like I think there's Power Pages as well now. But ultimately, Power BI is the business intelligence portion of the Power Platform. If anyone's wondering the difference between business intelligence and reporting is when you have something and you have the question and you want to know the answer. Business intelligence is when you don't necessarily have the answer, but you have the information. That's the big difference between business intelligence and reporting. I know you didn't ask the question. I put it out there.
That's very helpful. Very helpful. So, for those who want to learn more and know about SharePoint, I think it's important to mention that you have to first subscribe to M365. And if you wanted to create an inventory like a site, you'd have to have subscription. And then that's where you can access SharePoint to start doing these things. But before we go ahead and do that, Kevin, can you just show us how we can start off when we get into SharePoint or when we get to M365, how to launch SharePoint, how to access it? What are some of the things that you do first and foremost, being that we're a small organization?
So once you log in, do multi-factor authentication, all that good stuff, you'll just come to the screen and say, welcome to M365. And by the way, Copilot is Microsoft's AI arm. So, artificial intelligence, that's another, again,
It's another
we have
ChatGPT.
another course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's ChatGPT for M365 or Microsoft. So once you're in, you click on the top left waffle. I call it a waffle icon. And then if you signed up for at least the business basic or anything above, you're going to see SharePoint. You can access SharePoint from here. If you go to apps, you can access it from here as well. So SharePoint here. And then lastly, if you go to all apps, you should be able to access it from here as well. And of course, you're going to see all the other apps that you have access to from the all apps. So once again, main area I usually get it from is just you click on the waffle, click on SharePoint.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kevin. At least for today, I've learned a lot. I know you mentioned a few pieces, but I know in the next session, we'll talk about it. Things like you mentioned web parts and permissions. And I believe based on what you've taught me today, I think I'm no longer a SharePoint novice. I think I know more now. So I appreciate that.
Perfect. Yeah, so maybe next time, Jai, when we connect, we can actually create a site. We can dive into more stuff like web parts and actually start building an inventory of your farm that you wanted.
Thanks, Kevin.
Okay, so once again, guys, this is just SharePoint Q&A. We're going to have more of these. And if you have any questions, thoughts, concerns, please let us know. That's it. So once again, it's been a pleasure.
Thanks, guys.
Take care.
Bye.